Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, believe it or not, AMD's 6800 XT isn't the only card with that name. Allow me to introduce you to this. This is Nvidia's 6800 XT. It reminds me of that when mum says you've got insert item here at home meme. Oh, what's that? You want a 6800 XT for your birthday? Well, say no more. The main difference between the two is that the AMD card is out of stock everywhere or selling secondhand on eBay for over £1,000. This Nvidia one cost me just 20. The irony is that it can be just as hard to find. Despite being the XT model, which sounds pretty good, it's one of the weaker 6800 series cards in the series, with the GTO, GT, GS, GT Dual and 6800 Ultra outperforming it. That's a lot of 6800s. This card probably lags a tiny bit behind AMD's 6800 XT. In all seriousness, I ran the specs through a GPU comparison site and it told me that on paper the AMD card was 60,000% better. Oh dear. Better see what on earth this ancient thing can do then. I actually managed to get this working with the Windows 7 drivers on this Windows 10 Ryzen system. Driver support ended years ago, but the drivers will still install and work fine under the latest Windows 10 20H2 OS release. Recording internally caused frame rate dips and my capture card was incompatible with this hardware, so it's the old-fashioned method for capturing gameplay footage today. The GPU usage stayed pegged at 0% here, which is incorrect. It should read 100%, but I think MSI Afterburner had some compatibility issues with these old drivers, though I can't be sure. With Half-Life 2, we turned the settings right up, though we disabled anti-aliasing, as this caused huge frame dips with the 6800 XT. That feels weird to say, and I bet that not many reviewers this month have said that their 6800 XT struggles to play Half-Life smoothly. I like the way we're just using about 5% of the Ryzen's power. If this was a person, it would be falling asleep. Revisiting the classic that is the Elder Scrolls Oblivion worked out quite well. This is very much a 720p or lower graphics card at this point in time, but at this resolution it's not going to have any problems with games of a similar age. I was a little daring with the graphics settings and went for medium instead of low, which still meant a 30 plus FPS average, outside of towns anyway. Busier areas and combat situations will drop that figure down towards the low 20s, which doesn't feel too bad as it picks up again quite quickly, but for the most part you should be able to enjoy this legendary game on this hardware with, of course, some graphical sacrifices. Surprisingly, CSGO even fired up, though it resembled more of a PowerPoint presentation than an actual game. We were getting about 1 FPS at 720p, and later on I dropped the resolution to 640 by 480, where we saw about 8 or 9 FPS instead, so it was way better at the lower resolution, but still not playable even for me, and to be honest I'd be happy with 25 FPS or more. Unlike Oblivion, Skyrim will cause huge issues for the 6800 XT as well. Here once again we were running the game at 1280 by 720 with the lowest visual options, and going into the advanced options I also set all the distance sliders to their lowest as well. I found that looking up at the sky gave us close to 30 FPS, but yeah, you probably aren't going to be able to progress very far into the game if your character is always looking up. It's fine for fighting a dragon, but not so fine for fighting enemies that can't fly, which is pretty much everything else. So there we go. In Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the low settings meant a plus 100 FPS experience, but I decided to be a little more ambitious and go for very high, albeit with anti-aliasing turned off completely. There were still some moments whereby we hit that 100 FPS figure, but for the most part the game sat at around 40 to 60 in busier areas and 60 to 100 at the beach or in the countryside. I still love this game. Will San Andreas ever be topped? Who knows, but every time I end up benchmarking it I get distracted and then I play it for an hour or two before realising that I'm supposed to be working. That's the power of a timeless classic, I guess. So the footage here is taken from a game that roughly resembles Battlefield Bad Company 2, though at this point the 2 in the game's title could also refer to the number of frames per second that we're seeing. That's probably a bit harsh, it was more like 5 FPS, but what's deceiving here is that for about 3 seconds the intro sequence ran at 30 FPS before dropping down to this figure, so I thought we might get a playable experience. It's like when you fire up The Witcher 3 on low-end hardware and you're getting about 1000 FPS at the main menu and you think, oh, it's going to be quite good, and then you get into the game on a low-end graphics card and you get about 10 FPS. Next up, I tried another favourite of mine, Rainbow Six Vegas. I played this one and the sequel years ago on the 360, and the memory of them is just burnt into my brain forever. These were the two games that really made me appreciate the 360, and I remember looking in awe at the visuals. I'd still recommend playing these games, just not with a GeForce 6800 XT, that's all. Unless you don't mind 10 FPS. While we're on the subject of Vegas, Fallout New Vegas also ran on this card, and it ran better than Rainbow Six. Inside the New Vegas Strip area, the frame rate didn't do so well, but it's sort of playable, I guess. New Vegas is a slow-paced sort of game, but I might be a little biased because I first played it on PS3 years ago, and then I played it with an 8400 GS on PC, so I'm used to experiencing it with low frame rates. If we venture outside of the strip, which should be a little less demanding, then we do see the frame rate improve and sit closer to 30, though 25 is probably a more realistic expectation. But there we go, a 6800 XT you can actually buy, and a 6800 XT that is far more affordable for a lot of people as well, albeit a lot worse in terms of performance. Should you buy one? No, but if, like me, older games are more your thing, then it makes for an okay retro buy, and if you want something that's going to handle those older pre-2005 titles with ease, then you should consider one of these cards. Will I review the actual 6800 XT? Well, perhaps in 10 years' time, when the card might be available and when I can find one on the used market for a decent price. This one was actually pretty fun to mess around with. There are plenty of retro games that will run just fine on this card, of course, San Andreas being a pretty good example of that, as well as older Half-Life games, and even Oblivion if you don't mind a few visual sacrifices. I haven't seen many of these cards around on sites like eBay. This one cost me £20, as I said before, which is about £980 cheaper than the cheapest 6800 XT from AMD, but of course they are totally different things, and this was just for a bit of fun. All that's left to say then is thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel then, if you haven't done so already. Leave your thoughts down below on this card. Let me know if you've ever owned one, or perhaps you've owned something in the 6800 series, because it's a big series of cards. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.